After the final slap, the black maid did something no one ever expected. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was the final slap. The sound of it echoed through the grand, polished halls of the mansion, shattering the silence that had once held this house together. The maid, Maria, stood frozen, her head still turned to the side where the force of the blow had landed. Her hand hovered close to her cheek, a faint red mark already forming on her skin. The woman who had struck her, Elizabeth, the wealthy and powerful matriarch of the family, stood tall and defiant. Her eyes burned with anger, her mouth set in a tight line as she looked down at Maria. The words that followed were cold, dismissive, and final. You should have known your place, Maria. You're nothing more than a servant. The words stung more than the slap. Maria had heard them before, from Elizabeth and others in the family. They were the same words that echoed in her mind every day as she cleaned their floors, polished their furniture, and served their meals. But today was different. Today, something inside Maria snapped. As Elizabeth turned her back, dismissing her as if she were invisible, Maria did something no one in that room expected. She didn't retreat. She didn't apologize. Instead, she stood there, a slight trembling in her hands, but with a fire in her eyes that Elizabeth had never seen before. I'm not your servant, Maria said quietly, but her voice was firm, unwavering. Elizabeth froze, her back still turned, as if the words had not reached her. What did you say? She asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. Maria took a deep breath, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. I said, I'm not your servant. And for the first time, Maria didn't flinch when she spoke. Her eyes didn't dart away from Elizabeth's cold gaze. She was standing her ground. The room grew quiet. The other servants, who had been watching the scene unfold from the doorway, remained silent, their eyes wide in shock. They had never seen Maria speak like this, never seen her stand up for herself. You think you can treat me like this, just because you have money? Just because you think you're better than me? Maria's words hit harder than the slap. Elizabeth turned around slowly, a look of pure fury now replacing the shock on her face. You have no right to speak to me like that, she spat. Maria didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked across the room, her footsteps steady and purposeful. She picked up a vase from the table, a gift from Elizabeth's late mother, and turned it over in her hands, studying it as if it held all the answers. I have every right, Maria said softly, her eyes fixed on the vase, because I'm human, just like you. The silence in the room was thick now, hanging heavy like the weight of a secret that had been buried too long. No one moved. No one dared to speak. But in that moment, Maria knew, without a doubt, that things were about to change. She wasn't sure how or when, but this moment, would be the catalyst for everything to come. It wasn't the slap that broke her. It wasn't the cruel words. It was the realization that she was more than what they had made her believe. And in that realization, she had just started to fight back. As Maria stood there, staring at Elizabeth, the silence in the room was deafening. Her heart raced, not from fear, but from something new, something powerful she had never felt before. For the first time, she wasn't bowing her head. She wasn't cowering in fear. Her words, though soft, had shattered the air like a breaking glass. I'm not your servant. The words echoed in her mind, but she didn't regret them. Elizabeth, who had been looking at her with an almost smug satisfaction moments ago, now stood frozen, her mouth slightly agape. Maria could feel the weight of her eyes on her, but she didn't flinch. The sound of footsteps came from the doorway as the other servants cautiously entered, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had never seen Maria act like this, never seen her stand her ground. Elizabeth's eyes narrowed. She was not used to being challenged. Not in this house. Not by someone like Maria. What are you implying? Elizabeth finally asked, her voice sharp, her tone dripping with disdain. Maria didn't respond right away. She just let the silence settle between them, thick with tension. Then, slowly, she spoke again, her voice steady. I'm implying that I'm more than the job you've given me. I'm more than what you think I am. Elizabeth blinked, clearly stunned by the boldness in Maria's voice. She was used to people serving her without question, without challenge. This was new. This was unsettling. You think you can just walk away from this job, after everything I've done for you? Elizabeth asked, her voice rising slightly, trying to regain some control. I don't want to walk away, Maria said softly, yet with an unshakable conviction. But I don't want to be treated like I'm less than you. I've done this work for years, and I've earned the right to be treated with respect. For a moment, Elizabeth didn't know what to say. The arrogance she had built up over the years seemed to evaporate in the face of Maria's words. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she looked away, fuming with frustration. Maria could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw tightened. It was as if Elizabeth didn't know how to process what had just happened. Maria, still standing tall, knew she had won this moment. And though she didn't know what would come next, she also knew she couldn't go back to being the quiet, submissive maid anymore. The other servants, who had been silently watching the exchange, began to look at each other, exchanging glances. Maria's courage had shifted the atmosphere in the room. It was like a ripple in the water that expanded beyond just her and Elizabeth. It was a moment of change, and everyone felt it. You're right, Elizabeth said after a long pause, her voice tinged with something resembling uncertainty. But it's not that simple. You think you can just demand respect. Maria didn't let the challenge unsettle her. I think I deserve it, yes, she replied, her eyes unwavering. She was no longer looking at the floor or waiting to be told what to do. She was standing in her own power. You may think that's naive, Maria continued, but I'm done being invisible. I'm done letting people treat me like I'm less than them because of my job, because of my background. She took a deep breath, the weight of her own words settling in her chest. I'm done. There was a brief moment of silence, where Elizabeth seemed to weigh the words, but nothing came out. The other servants, now looking at Maria with newfound respect, started to quietly move away, sensing that the confrontation had reached its peak. Maria's heart pounded, but she held her ground. Elizabeth, now somewhat defeated in her own way, looked at her with a flicker of something between anger and disbelief. Fine, Elizabeth said curtly. You've made your point. Maria didn't flinch. She just nodded. I'm going to pack my things, Maria said calmly. I'm leaving this house, but I will never forget how you treated me. Elizabeth scoffed, but said nothing more. Maria walked out of the room, her head held high. It was the first time she had ever felt like she truly belonged somewhere, even if it wasn't in this house. As she stepped into the hallway, she could hear the hushed voices of the other servants. They were talking about her, talking about what she had done. It was a victory, not just for her, but for all of them. She had just made the first step toward something bigger, something she had been too afraid to believe in before. And as she left the mansion behind, she knew that no matter what happened next, she had changed the course of her life. She had found her voice. Maria walked away from the mansion that day with nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart full of conviction. The sun had already begun to set as she made her way down the long driveway, the cool evening breeze ruffling her hair. She had expected to feel fear, but instead, she felt something else, freedom. She didn't know where she was going next, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was in control of her own life. She walked faster, as if the road ahead was calling to her, urging her to leave behind everything that had held her back. As she reached the end of the driveway, a car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down, and a familiar voice called out, "Maria, wait." She turned, surprised to see Mr. Anderson, the billionaire who had witnessed her confrontation with Elizabeth. He had always been distant, cold even, but there was something in his eyes now that was different, something that made Maria stop in her tracks. "I need to talk to you," Mr. Anderson said, his voice calm but urgent. Maria didn't know what to expect from him. She had never spoken to him much beyond the polite exchanges during her work at the mansion. "What is it?" she asked, her tone cautious. Mr. Anderson opened the car door and stepped out, his eyes locking onto hers. "You're leaving?" he asked, his voice a mixture of curiosity and concern. Maria nodded slowly. "Yes," she said simply. "I'm leaving." He looked at her for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, after a pause, he spoke again. "You know, you've changed things in that house. I've seen the way Elizabeth treats you, and I can't stand by and do nothing anymore." Maria raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. What do you mean? She asked. I mean, Mr. Anderson said, his voice softer now. I've been in that house for years, and I've seen the way she treats people, especially you. I'm not blind. You stood up to her today, and I respect that. But I also know you deserve more than what she's given you. Maria didn't know how to respond. She had always been taught to keep her head down, to accept the things that came her way. But here, in this moment, with Mr. Anderson standing in front of her, something inside her stirred. I don't want to go back, she said, her voice steady. But I don't know what to do next. I don't have anywhere to go. Mr. Anderson looked at her thoughtfully. You're not alone, he said. I know a place, a small apartment. You can stay there, just for a little while, until you figure things out. Maria was taken aback. She had never expected someone like him to offer help. In the mansion, he had always seemed so distant, so disconnected from everything. But now, seeing him offer something that felt real, something genuine, made her heart soften. Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice filled with doubt. Because you helped yourself, Mr. Anderson replied, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her feel seen for the first time in a long while. I've watched you for years, Maria. You've worked so hard, and you've never asked for anything. You've given so much, and it's time you get something in return. You deserve more than what they've given you. Maria stood there, processing his words. She had always been the one to help others, to give without expecting anything in return. But now, someone was offering to help her. The weight of his offer hung in the air, heavy with possibilities. I don't know, she said quietly. I've never taken anything from anyone before. You don't have to be afraid to accept help, Mr. Anderson said, his voice gentle. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength to know when you need it. Maria looked at him for a long moment, her heart torn. She had always prided herself on her independence, but for the first time, she wondered if it was time to let someone in. I'll think about it, she said finally, her voice low but sincere. Mr. Anderson nodded, as if he had expected her answer. Take your time. I'll be here when you're ready. As he got back into the car and drove away, Maria stood there, her mind racing with thoughts and emotions. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like there was a way out, a way forward. And that, she realized, was enough for now. As Maria stood in the dimly lit hallway of the small apartment, she could hardly believe the change that had come over her life in just a few days. It felt like a different world compared to the mansion she had left behind. The sounds of the city outside, honking cars, distant chatter, the hum of everyday life, were so different from the eerie silence of the grand house she had once called home. The apartment was small, modest, but it was hers. For the first time in years, Maria felt a sense of ownership, a sense of being free to make her own choices without fear of retribution. She had a bed to sleep in, a small kitchen to prepare meals, and a bathroom to call her own. There was no grandeur, no polished marble floors or crystal chandeliers, but there was something far more important: dignity. The small apartment was a refuge, a place where she could breathe and begin to think about the future. She had spent so many years running on autopilot, simply surviving, doing what was expected of her without ever considering what she wanted. But now she could choose. As she unpacked the few belongings she had brought with her, clothes, a few photographs, some books, a knock on the door broke the silence. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over and opened it. To her surprise, it was Mr. Anderson standing in the doorway. I thought you might need some help getting settled in, he said, holding a small grocery bag in his hands. Maria stood there, surprised, unsure of how to react. She had not expected him to follow through on his offer. I didn't ask for this, she said softly, still standing in the doorway. I know, he replied with a warm smile. But I also know that sometimes we all need a little help, even when we don't ask for it. He stepped into the apartment, and Maria stepped aside, allowing him to enter. She didn't know what to say, so she simply stood there, watching him as he placed the bag on the counter. I thought you might need some food, he said, taking out a loaf of bread, some cheese, and a carton of milk. I'm not used to people doing things like this for me, Maria said, her voice tinged with disbelief. You don't have to thank me, he said, his voice gentle. You've been through a lot, and I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Maria's heart swelled with gratitude, but also with confusion. She had never expected this kind of kindness, not from someone like Mr. Anderson, who had always seemed so distant and detached. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I see you," he said simply. "I see your strength, your dignity, and I respect that. You're not just a maid, Maria. You're a person with worth, just like anyone else." Maria didn't know how to respond. She had spent so many years being invisible, being treated as if she were less than others. Hearing those words, from someone like him, made her feel seen for the first time in a long while. "I don't know what to say," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't have to say anything," Mr. Anderson replied. "Just know that you're not alone." There was a long silence as Maria absorbed his words. She felt a lump form in her throat, a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite identify. She had spent so much of her life hiding, afraid of being seen, afraid of being judged. But now, in this small apartment, with Mr. Anderson's kindness wrapping around her like a blanket, she felt a glimmer of hope. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice filled with sincerity. "You don't have to thank me," he said with a smile. "Just take care of yourself." Maria nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had a long road ahead of her, but for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to walk it alone. As Mr. Anderson left, he paused at the door and turned back to her. "If you ever need anything, you know where to find me," he said. Maria smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in days. "I will," she said. After he left, Maria closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, taking a deep breath. She looked around the apartment again, taking in the reality of her new life. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the life she had imagined for herself, but it was hers. And that, she realized, was enough. She had survived the worst, and now, she had the chance to build something new. She could choose who she wanted to be, and that was a gift she hadn't had in a long time. As the sun began to set, Maria sat down at the small kitchen table, a cup of tea in front of her. The city outside was bustling, but inside the apartment, there was peace. For the first time in years, Maria felt like she could breathe. And that was the beginning of something beautiful. Maria had never felt more alive. For the first time in her life, she was in control of her own destiny. The small apartment, though modest, had become her sanctuary, a place where she could breathe, think, and begin to heal. The weight of the past had not vanished, but it had started to fade into the background, replaced by a sense of possibility. It was late afternoon, and the soft light from the setting sun streamed through the window, casting a warm glow across the room. Maria sat at the small table, a cup of tea in front of her, the steam rising gently into the air. She had spent the past few days adjusting to this new chapter in her life, and while it hadn't been easy, she was beginning to feel a sense of peace. The knocks at her door had become less frequent, and the phone calls from Elizabeth, the woman who had once been her employer, had stopped entirely. Maria couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. She had left the mansion, but in many ways, the mansion had also left her. The life she had lived there felt so far away now, like a dream she was slowly waking up from. But just as she was starting to settle into this new routine, there was another knock on her door. It was a soft tap at first, almost tentative, but it was enough to pull Maria out of her thoughts. She stood up and walked over to the door, her heart racing slightly. When she opened it, she was surprised to find a young girl standing there, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers in her hands. The girl was about 10, maybe 11, with dark eyes and a shy smile. "Are you Maria?" she asked quietly. Maria nodded, still taken aback by the girl's sudden appearance. "Yes, I am. Can I help you?" The girl hesitated, looking down at the flowers for a moment before meeting Maria's gaze. I'm sorry to bother you," she said softly, "but I was wondering if you could help me. My mom, she's sick, and we don't have enough money to get her the medicine she needs." Maria's heart clenched. She had seen so much suffering in her life, and it always seemed to come from places where people were trying to survive. "Where do you live?" Maria asked, her voice gentle. The girl looked up at her with hopeful eyes. "Just down the street," she said, "in the old house near the park." Maria glanced down at the flowers in the girl's hands, and something inside her stirred. She had felt helpless many times in her life, but now, in this moment, she knew she couldn't turn away. "Come inside," Maria said, stepping aside to let the girl enter. "Let me see what I can do." The girl's eyes widened in surprise, and she stepped inside hesitantly. "You're really going to help?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course," Maria replied, her voice firm. Everyone deserves help when they need it. The girl smiled, a small, shy smile that made Maria's heart ache. Thank you, she whispered. Maria closed the door behind her and led the girl to the small kitchen. She made them both tea, the warmth of the liquid filling the silence between them. As they sat down at the table, Maria listened as the girl told her about her mother, how she had fallen ill a few weeks ago and had been unable to get out of bed since. We don't have a lot, the girl said softly, her eyes downcast. But we have each other. Maria felt a lump form in her throat. She remembered a time when she had been just like this girl, struggling, fighting for survival, unsure of where the next meal would come from. She had been lucky to have someone take her in, to help her find a way forward. But this girl, this little girl, didn't have that. And Maria couldn't ignore that. I'll help, Maria said firmly. I don't have much, but I can give what I have. The girl's face brightened. Really? She asked, her voice full of hope. Really, Maria replied with a soft smile. Now, let's go see your mother. The two of them walked together to the old house near the park. It was small, dilapidated, but it was a home. As they approached the door, the girl hesitated. Are you sure you want to do this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maria looked down at the girl, her expression soft but resolute. I'm sure, she said. No one should have to face things alone. The girl smiled again, this time more brightly, and knocked on the door. It opened slowly, revealing a woman lying in bed, her face pale and drawn. She looked up at Maria with tired eyes, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. This is Maria, the girl said softly, stepping aside. She's here to help. The woman's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but Maria stepped forward, holding out a small bundle of supplies she had gathered from her apartment. I don't have much, Maria said, her voice quiet but steady. But I've brought what I could. The woman looked at the bundle, then back at Maria, and in that moment, something changed. The woman's guarded expression softened, and she nodded. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Maria smiled and placed a hand on her shoulder. No one should have to go through this alone, she said. You have people who care. As she left the house later that afternoon, Maria felt something inside her shift. It wasn't just about giving or receiving help. It was about understanding the power of kindness and how it could heal even the deepest wounds. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a person who could make a difference. And for the first time, Maria knew she wasn't alone either. Maria awoke the next morning to the soft light filtering through the small window of her apartment. The streets outside were already bustling with the rhythm of daily life, but inside, there was still a quiet that felt peaceful in its own way. As she stretched and made her way to the kitchen to start her day, she thought about the events of the previous day, the visit to the little girl's home, the act of kindness, and the moment she had shared with a stranger who had trusted her. It felt like a small victory, one that was still fresh and tender in her heart. But as much as Maria had begun to feel the warmth of hope, she knew that her journey was far from over. The weight of the past still loomed over her, even though she had left the mansion behind. She had to keep moving forward. After breakfast, Maria sat down with her phone. She had been avoiding checking her messages, afraid of what she might find. But today, she knew it was time. As her finger hovered over the screen, a message from Mr. Anderson appeared. Maria, I wanted to check in and see how you're doing. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I've arranged something for you. It's just a start, but I think it'll help. Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what he meant by arrange something, but she felt a flicker of curiosity and maybe a little apprehension ignite inside her. She hadn't expected him to follow through so quickly. She typed a quick response, thanking him and asking for more details. She needed to know what he had planned. Less than an hour later, her phone rang. It was Mr. Anderson. Maria, his voice was warm and steady, as usual. I've arranged for you to meet with someone today. His name is Marcus King, and he works at a local nonprofit organization. He helps people in situations like yours, people who need a fresh start. I believe he can help you find a way forward. Would you be open to meeting him? Maria felt a slight unease ripple through her chest. She had been independent for so long, and accepting help, real help, from a stranger, felt both foreign and unsettling. But the truth was, she was stuck. She couldn't keep going like this on her own. I'll meet him, Maria said, surprising even herself with how quickly the words came out. Good, Mr. Anderson said. He's expecting you. I'll send you the details of the time and place. I think this could be the first step toward what you've been hoping for. As she hung up the phone, Maria felt the weight of his words. Hope. It was a word that had been so foreign to her for so long. She had learned to live without it, to survive without the expectation that things could change. But now, something about Mr. Anderson's words sparked a small ember of possibility inside her. Could things really change for her? Could she build a new life for herself, one where she wasn't defined by her past? As the morning passed, Maria prepared for the meeting. She changed into the best clothes she had, a simple but clean dress she had worn to a few family gatherings. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. The walk to the meeting place was quiet, the streets calm with the early morning light. She tried to ignore the nagging doubts in her mind, tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. What if Marcus King didn't believe her? What if he didn't think she was worth helping? The thoughts swirled in her head as she reached the building. It was a small community center, modest but welcoming. She stepped inside, her heart pounding, her nerves rising. She was greeted by a receptionist who directed her to a room at the back. When Maria walked in, she saw a man sitting at a desk, looking over some papers. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment, their eyes locked. He was in his late 30s, with dark hair and a kind but serious expression. Maria, he asked, standing up to shake her hand. It's good to meet you. It's nice to meet you, too, she said, her voice shaky but polite. Mr. Anderson told me about you. He said you might be able to help. Marcus smiled, a warm, genuine smile that put her at ease. I hope so. I work with people who need a second chance, a fresh start. And from what I've heard, you've had a tough road, Maria. The way he said her name, with such sincerity, made her feel like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone in this. I've been struggling, she admitted. It's been hard to find a way out of where I've been. I understand, Marcus said, sitting down and gesturing for her to do the same. But the first step is acknowledging that you don't have to do it alone. There are people who want to help, people who see your worth. You don't have to keep carrying all of this on your own. Maria swallowed the lump in her throat, her chest tightening. She had spent so much of her life hiding, pretending she didn't need anyone. But now, here in this small room with Marcus, she felt something shift. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe this was the moment her life would change. As the conversation continued, Maria felt herself begin to relax. Marcus was patient, understanding, and he listened to her without judgment. They talked about her past, about her struggles, and about what she wanted for her future. By the time they finished, Maria felt a small spark of hope flicker inside her. A hope that maybe, just maybe, she could build something new. I'm here to help you, Maria, Marcus said as they stood to leave. This is just the beginning, but I think we can find a way forward together. Maria smiled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. She had taken the first step toward the life she had always dreamed of. And for the first time in a long while, she believed it was possible. Maria had only just begun to believe that change was possible, and yet, life seemed determined to test that belief. It had been 2 weeks since she had met Marcus, and in those 2 weeks, everything had started to shift. She had enrolled in a local program designed to help people like her. People who had been struggling, people who needed to rebuild. Every day, she worked on herself, learning new skills, finding new ways to handle the past, and most importantly, allowing herself to trust again. Marcus had helped her find a foundation, a place where she could stand tall and not feel like the weight of the world was on her shoulders. The counseling sessions, the group meetings, it wasn't easy, but Maria knew she needed this. However, life had a funny way of complicating things. One evening, as Maria returned to her apartment after a long day of work and study, she found a letter slipped under her door. She recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Elizabeth. The letter was short, curt, and to the point. Maria, I need you to come back. Things have changed here, and I have a job for you. Come back and prove your loyalty. The words felt like a slap in the face. After everything she had been through, everything she had worked for, Elizabeth thought she could just pull her back with a few words. It was as if Maria had never left, as if nothing had changed. Her hands shook as she held the letter, reading and rereading the words. She had moved on. She had made a new life for herself, a life where she wasn't defined by the way Elizabeth had treated her. And now this. The temptation to go back to the familiarity of the mansion was strong, but deep down, Maria knew that would only set her back. It wasn't just about pride anymore. It was about who she wanted to be. She folded the letter and set it down on the table. She knew what she had to do. But even as she decided, a feeling of doubt crept in. What if she was making a mistake? What if this was the only chance to go back to a life of comfort, to the certainty of a job that she knew so well? As the days passed, the letter sat on her table like a constant reminder of the choice she had to make. Marcus, too, had noticed the change in her. He saw the struggle in her eyes when they talked, the way she would look down whenever the subject of her past came up. He knew she was thinking about the letter. "You're hesitating," he said one afternoon as they sat in his office, discussing her progress. "It's a big decision," Maria replied, trying to sound calm. But Marcus saw through her. "You don't owe them anything, Maria," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. "I know what you're thinking. You feel like you should go back, that maybe this is your last chance. But you have to ask yourself, what will it cost you?" Maria didn't answer right away. She didn't want to admit that part of her still wanted to return, wanted to feel needed again, even if it meant sacrificing her sense of self. "I don't want to go back to that life," she said finally, her voice shaky. "But it's hard. It's hard to let go." Marcus nodded, understanding. Letting go is never easy, but it's the only way to move forward. You can't hold on to the past and expect to build something new. You've made so much progress, Maria. Don't let this pull you back. His words hit her harder than she expected. She had known, deep down, that Marcus was right. She had come too far to let fear guide her now. The fear of being alone, the fear of not being good enough, had held her back for so long. But now, she had a chance to truly be free. That night, Maria sat alone in her apartment, the letter still sitting on the table in front of her. She thought about everything she had gone through. The years of being overlooked, the way Elizabeth had treated her, the way she had allowed herself to be defined by other people's expectations. She thought about the work she was doing now, the confidence she had started to build. She had a future now. She didn't need to go back. She could stand on her own 2 feet. With a deep breath, Maria picked up the letter and tore it into pieces. She stood up, walked to the trash can, and threw the pieces inside. It felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. For the first time, Maria felt like she was truly free. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she no longer felt like she had to go backward to find the answers. She had already started moving forward. As the days passed, Maria continued her work with Marcus. Her confidence grew, and she began to feel like the woman she had always wanted to be. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for certain. She was in control of her own future. She wasn't the maid anymore. She was Maria, a woman who had fought for her place in the world. And she was finally ready to embrace the life she had always dreamed of. As Maria settled into her new routine, she began to feel a sense of purpose she had never experienced before. It wasn't just the work with Marcus, though that had been life-changing. It was the way she had started to view herself. The woman who had once been a maid, resigned to the shadows, was beginning to step into the light. She found a job at a local coffee shop, something simple, but it gave her the independence she had longed for. The owners were kind, the work was steady, and for the first time, Maria felt like she was truly a part of something. Each morning, she walked to the coffee shop with a sense of pride. She had a routine, a life, and she was no longer the person who waited to be told what to do. The anxiety that had once ruled her thoughts was slowly being replaced by something new: confidence. It was the kind of confidence that came from taking small steps, knowing that each choice she made brought her closer to the woman she wanted to be. As the weeks passed, Maria began to notice something she hadn't expected. She was starting to feel a sense of belonging, not just in her job or the apartment she called home, but in the world around her. People smiled at her on the street, greeted her in passing, and she realized she was no longer invisible. But just as things were beginning to fall into place, an unexpected challenge arose. One evening, as Maria was closing up the coffee shop, she received a call from an unknown number. She hesitated before answering, but curiosity got the better of her. "Hello," she said, her voice tentative. "Maria?" The voice on the other end was familiar, but it took a moment for Maria to place it. "This is Elizabeth," the voice said. Maria's stomach tightened. She hadn't spoken to Elizabeth since she left the mansion, and she had no desire to reopen that chapter. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. Elizabeth continued, her tone a mixture of guilt and urgency. But I need your help. Maria's heart skipped a beat. Why would I help you? She asked, her voice steady despite the surprise and hurt that bubbled up inside her. Because I was wrong, Elizabeth said, the words laced with a vulnerability Maria hadn't expected. I treated you terribly, and I want to make it right. I need your help with something important. Maria stood there, the phone pressed to her ear, her thoughts racing. Elizabeth had never apologized before. She had never shown any remorse for the way she had treated Maria. To hear her now, asking for help, was unexpected, and it stirred something inside Maria. What do you need? Maria asked, her voice cautious but open. Elizabeth hesitated for a moment before speaking again. It's complicated, Maria. I need someone who understands the situation, someone who can help me make the right decision. And I know you're the only one who can do it. Maria thought for a moment. The temptation to return to the mansion, to slip back into the familiar roles she had played for so many years, was there. It would be easy, but it wasn't what she wanted. It wasn't what she needed. I'm not that person anymore, Elizabeth, Maria said firmly. I'm not the one you can control. I'm not the one you can manipulate. I've moved on. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Elizabeth spoke again, her voice was softer, tinged with sadness. I didn't want to lose you, Maria. I never realized how much you meant until it was too late. Maria closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the weight of Elizabeth's words. I've changed, Maria said quietly, and I don't regret it. After a pause, Elizabeth spoke again, this time with a touch of resignation. I understand, she said softly. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. Maria didn't know what to say. She hadn't expected an apology, let alone one that felt so genuine. It was a moment of healing, not just for Elizabeth, but for herself as well. Thank you, Maria said finally. But I have to keep moving forward. I can't go back. She hung up the phone, feeling a mix of emotions wash over her. There had been a time when she would have clung to any opportunity to return to the life she once knew. But now, she was different. She had found a new sense of purpose, and she wasn't willing to sacrifice that for anything. As the days went by, Maria felt a shift inside her. The call from Elizabeth had been a reminder that, while the past could try to pull her back, she had the power to choose her own path. And she was ready to keep moving forward. She threw herself into her work with renewed determination. The people around her, the customers at the coffee shop, the new friends she was making. This was her world now. She was no longer defined by the mansion, by Elizabeth, or by the role she had played in that life. She was Maria, a woman who had fought for her freedom and had found her own voice. And for the first time, she felt truly free. Maria woke up the next morning with a sense of determination she hadn't known she had. She had spent so many years in the shadows, but now, it felt like the sun was finally breaking through. The call from Elizabeth had been a turning point. She hadn't expected it, but it had forced her to confront the past she was so eager to leave behind. Yet, in the end, it had only reinforced her resolve to keep moving forward. No more looking back. No more doubting herself. The morning was crisp, the air fresh as she walked to work, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. As she entered the coffee shop, the familiar hum of conversations and the comforting smell of coffee greeted her. It was a place she had come to love, a place that felt like home. As she put on her apron and began setting up for the day, she noticed the steady stream of customers coming in, each one greeted with a warm smile and a cup of comfort. It was the small things, Maria realized. The everyday kindness, the feeling of being needed, that made all the difference. As the morning passed, she caught sight of a familiar face. It was Marcus, standing by the counter, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a more serious expression. Hey, Maria said as she approached, wiping her hands on her apron. Everything okay? Marcus looked at her, a slight smile on his face, but there was something else behind his eyes. I've been meaning to talk to you, he said, his tone more serious than usual. Maria felt a twinge of unease. What's going on? She asked, her voice soft. Marcus hesitated, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice so only she could hear. There's something I need to tell you, something that I've been working on for a while. It's about the project I mentioned, the one where I help people rebuild their lives. I want you to be a part of it. Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had heard about the program, but never thought she'd be directly involved. Me? she asked, surprised. Why me? Because you've been through it, Marcus said, his voice steady and kind. You understand what it's like to struggle. You understand the kind of help people need. And most importantly, you've found a way out. You've rebuilt your life. That's exactly what this project needs, someone who knows how to make it through the other side. Maria stood there, taking in his words. She had never thought of herself as an example for others. She had always just been focused on surviving. But now, it seemed like she was being asked to do something more. She was being asked to help others in the way that she had once needed help. I don't know if I'm ready for that, Maria admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm still figuring things out myself. Marcus smiled, a reassuring smile that made Maria feel seen, understood. You don't have to have it all figured out. No one does. But you've already done the hardest part. You've taken the first step. Now, you can help others take theirs. The idea felt daunting, but there was also something incredibly powerful about it. She had spent so many years feeling small, invisible, like she was just a part of someone else's world. But now, here she was, standing in front of someone who saw her potential, who believed in her. And that belief sparked something inside her. Maybe she wasn't just a maid. Maybe she wasn't just a survivor. Maybe, just maybe, she was more than that. I'll do it, Maria said, her voice firm with the weight of the decision. I'm in. Marcus's eyes lit up with approval. I knew you'd say that. He handed her a piece of paper with the details of the project. We'll start small. We'll meet with some of the people who need help, and we'll show them that they have a way out too. It's going to take time, but I know you're the right person for this. Maria looked at the paper, her mind racing. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew this was the next step. She could feel it in her bones. When do we start? She asked. Tomorrow, Marcus replied with a smile. I'll meet you at the center, and we'll go from there. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Maria couldn't stop thinking about what Marcus had said. It was a big step, but she was ready. She had worked so hard to get to this point, and now she had the chance to help others do the same. That night, as she sat alone in her apartment, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about living, about making a difference, about using her own experiences to help others. Maria smiled to herself as she thought about the journey ahead. She wasn't just starting a new chapter, she was writing a whole new story. And this time, she would be the author. The next morning, Maria woke up early, the excitement of the new project coursing through her veins. She had spent so many years trying to survive, but now she was about to take her first real step into living, a life where she could make a difference. The thought of helping others who had been through struggles like hers gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't known she was missing. She had a fresh sense of responsibility, not just for herself, but for others. She was no longer running away from her past. She was embracing it and using it to help others who were still stuck. She got dressed quickly, the anticipation of the day ahead driving her forward. She had never felt this nervous about something in her life, but it was the good kind of nervous, the kind that came with the knowledge that she was doing something important. As she arrived at the community center, she was greeted by Marcus, who was already talking to a group of people. They were sitting in a circle, some older, some younger, but all of them looked like they were holding on to something that made them feel less than, something they were trying to shake off. Maria stood in the doorway for a moment, gathering her thoughts, before walking into the room. She felt the eyes of the group fall on her, curious, unsure, but eager to see what she had to offer. This is Maria, Marcus said, his voice warm, introducing her to the group. She's been through a lot, just like many of you. And she's here to show you that you can move past the past, that you don't have to stay stuck. Maria took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly, but she kept her voice steady. I'm here because I know what it's like to feel like you're invisible, like you're trapped in a life you didn't choose, she began. I spent years living under someone else's expectations, trying to survive, trying to be what everyone else wanted me to be. But then I realized something. I don't have to stay stuck. And neither do you. She paused, looking around the room, meeting the eyes of each person. I'm not here to tell you that the road ahead will be easy. It won't be, but it will be worth it. And I'm here to help you take the first step, just like I had to. There was silence for a moment, a heavy silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that happens when people are listening, truly listening. Maria continued, sharing bits of her own journey, the obstacles she had faced, the pain she had endured. She didn't hold back. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She talked about the time she had felt invisible, the time she had been made to feel small, the moments she had questioned her worth. But then she talked about the turning point, the moment she realized that she didn't have to let others define her. It's hard, she said, to let go of the past, to stop letting it control you. But it's the first step to finding who you really are. One by one, people in the group began to speak. They shared their stories, stories of hardship, of pain, of being overlooked or mistreated. Maria listened, her heart aching for each of them. But she also felt a sense of solidarity. They weren't just sharing their struggles. They were starting to take that first step toward healing. After the session, as the group slowly dispersed, Maria felt a sense of fulfillment that she hadn't felt in years. This was what she was meant to do. This was her calling, not just to survive, but to help others rise from the ashes of their pasts. Marcus came over to her, his expression proud but thoughtful. "You did great," he said. "I knew you'd be able to connect with them." Maria smiled, though she felt a lump form in her throat. "I didn't know I had it in me," she admitted. "But I'm glad I did it. I feel like this is where I'm supposed to be." "You're doing great," Marcus said, clapping her on the back. "And this is just the beginning." As the weeks passed, Maria continued to work with Marcus and the group. She helped organize meetings, guided people through their struggles, and slowly, the group began to thrive. They were learning, growing, and most importantly, they were supporting one another. Maria wasn't just helping them, they were helping her too. They were all on the same journey, walking side by side, each of them trying to make sense of their lives, trying to rebuild what had been broken. The more she worked with them, the more she realized that the healing process was mutual. She was healing too. She was finding a sense of purpose, something that had been missing for so long. She wasn't just Maria the maid anymore. She wasn't the girl who had been overlooked, pushed aside, or treated like she was less than. She was Maria, a woman who had fought through her past, who had found her voice, and who was now helping others find theirs. And for the first time, she felt truly alive, truly free, and ready for whatever came next. Maria stood in front of the small community center, feeling the weight of the decision that had brought her here. The past few months had been a whirlwind of growth, new challenges, and painful realizations. She had begun to rebuild her life, to step into a role that was not defined by her past, but shaped by her future. But now, as she looked at the familiar building, her heart skipped a beat. She had been here before, and the memories that flooded her mind were a mix of pain and strength. This was the place where she had once felt invisible, where she had been seen only as someone's servant. But today, things were different. She had learned to see herself in a new light. And now, the moment had come for her to face her past one final time. The door opened, and Marcus stepped out, a smile on his face but a hint of concern in his eyes. "Maria," he greeted her warmly. "Are you ready for today?" Maria nodded, her stomach fluttering with a mix of nerves and determination. "I think so," she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty she felt inside. Marcus could sense the hesitation in her voice. "You've been through so much already," he said, his tone reassuring. "Today is about showing them who you are now. You're not the same person you were when you left. You've grown, and that's what matters." Maria took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the crowd that had gathered inside the community center. It wasn't a huge crowd, but the energy in the room was palpable. She could see the faces of people she had helped, people who had been through similar struggles. They had come together to support each other, to share their experiences, and to heal. She had been a part of that healing process, but today, it was her turn to share her own story. As Maria stepped inside, the room fell quiet. All eyes were on her, and for a moment, she felt that familiar sense of vulnerability. But then she remembered Marcus's words. She was not the same person. She had a voice now, a voice that mattered. She stepped up to the front of the room, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. The room was still, waiting for her to speak. She took a deep breath, and then she began. "I used to be like all of you," Maria said, her voice clear and strong. "I used to think I was invisible, that I didn't matter. I spent so many years trying to survive, trying to make everyone around me happy, even if it meant losing myself in the process." She paused, looking around the room, her eyes meeting the faces of those who had gathered. "But what I've learned is that we don't have to live like that. We don't have to be defined by our pasts, by the things that have hurt us. We can choose to move forward, to rebuild, and to create something better for ourselves. As she spoke, Maria could feel the shift in the room. There was a palpable sense of understanding, of shared experience. They were all in this together, each of them struggling, but also learning, growing, and healing. I'm not here to tell you that it's easy, Maria continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. It's hard. It's messy, but it's worth it. And I'm standing here today to tell you that you can do it too. You can build a life that is yours. You can take control of your future. The room was silent for a moment, and then, slowly, someone in the back of the room stood up. It was a man, older than Maria, his face weathered by time and hardship. You're right, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We've been through hell, all of us. But hearing you say that, hearing you tell us that we don't have to stay stuck, that's something we needed to hear. Maria smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. This was what it was all about. This was why she had come back to this place, to show them that they weren't alone, to remind them that there was always hope. I'm not here to be anyone's savior, Maria said, her voice soft but firm. I'm just here to tell you that you don't have to be defined by your past. You can create your own future, one choice at a time. Another person stood up, then another, and soon, the room was filled with voices, sharing their stories, their struggles, and their dreams. It was a beautiful moment of connection, of healing. Maria could feel the weight of the years she had spent hiding, of the woman she had once been, slipping away. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a leader, a guide, someone who could help others find their way. As the meeting came to a close, Maria felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had done it. She had faced her past, shared her story, and helped others see that they, too, had the power to change their lives. She was no longer the maid, no longer the invisible woman who had been pushed aside. She was Maria, strong, capable, and ready to face whatever came next. As she walked out of the room, Marcus caught up with her, a proud smile on his face. That was amazing, he said, his voice full of admiration. Maria smiled back, feeling a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. Thank you for believing in me, she said softly. I don't think I could have done it without you. You did it all on your own, Marcus replied. You've always had it in you. You just needed to believe it. And for the first time in her life, Maria truly believed it. She had come so far, and she knew that the journey was just beginning. The following days were a whirlwind of activity, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Maria didn't feel like she was running to catch up. Each step she took, no matter how small, brought her closer to something she had only dared to dream about. She had been part of the group at the community center for several weeks now, helping others find their way, guiding them as they faced their own demons. She'd found a purpose, and that purpose had given her something she hadn't had in years, peace. Yet even as she settled into this new life, there were still lingering shadows, moments when the past crept up behind her like a familiar ghost. One of those moments came when she received a phone call one afternoon. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. Elizabeth. Maria, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I need to talk to you. Please. Maria hesitated. It had been months since their last conversation. She had left that chapter of her life behind, but she couldn't deny the part of her that still wondered what Elizabeth wanted now. What's this about? Maria asked, her voice steady but cautious. Elizabeth took a long breath before answering. I don't know where else to turn, she admitted, her words soft, almost vulnerable. I've been trying to make things right, but it's harder than I thought. I can't do it alone. Maria's heart tightened, a mix of disbelief and something else she couldn't quite place. You want me to help you? She asked, the question more out of shock than expectation. Yes, Elizabeth said. I need someone to help me. I need your advice. I've made so many mistakes, and now everything is falling apart. I don't know how to fix it. There was a long pause. Maria felt a wave of frustration and anger rise within her, but she held it in. She had forgiven Elizabeth for what had happened in the past, but that didn't mean she was ready to go back to her old life, to be used or manipulated again. I've moved on, Elizabeth, Maria said, her voice calm but firm. I'm not that person anymore. I'm not the person who lives to please you or anyone else. She could hear Elizabeth sigh on the other end of the line. I know, she said quietly. I don't expect you to come back to work for me. I just need someone to help me figure out what to do next. My life is falling apart, and I don't know how to fix it. Maria felt a twinge of sympathy for Elizabeth, but it was fleeting. She had been there for years, always in the background, always doing what was expected of her. The past couldn't be undone. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, Maria said, but I'm not the person you need. I'm working with people who are just like me, people who are trying to rebuild their lives. And that's where I'm needed, not in your world. She took a deep breath, letting the words sink in. She had made the choice to move forward. I can't help you, Maria continued, but I hope you find what you're looking for. She ended the call before Elizabeth could say anything more. Maria stood there for a moment, the silence in the room almost deafening. For a split second, she questioned whether she had done the right thing. But deep down, she knew it was the right decision. She had spent so many years caught up in someone else's expectations, and she couldn't go back to that. She had to keep moving forward. The next few days were a blur of work, meetings, and self-reflection. Maria continued to help others through the program, watching as they too began to rebuild their lives. The work wasn't easy, but it was meaningful. Every time she saw someone take a step forward, it reminded her that change was possible, that healing was possible. And every time she helped someone else, she was also helping herself. One afternoon, after a particularly emotional group session, Maria found herself sitting outside, catching her breath. It was a rare moment of quiet in a life that had been anything but. She closed her eyes, letting the sun warm her face, and thought about how far she had come. She wasn't the same woman who had been trapped in a life of servitude, barely noticed, constantly overlooked. She was someone else now, someone who had found her voice, her strength, and her worth. She was Maria, a woman who had risen from the ashes of her past and had learned to stand tall. Just as she was about to stand up, she felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Marcus. Hey, he said, his voice warm as always. You doing okay? Maria smiled up at him. Yeah, she said. I'm doing more than okay. He sat down beside her, his expression thoughtful. You know, I've been watching you. You've come a long way. You've helped so many people, and I think you're starting to see what I see in you. Maria raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. What do you see? She asked. Marcus looked at her, his eyes serious. I see someone who's not just surviving anymore. I see someone who's thriving. You're a leader, Maria. You've found your voice, and now, it's time to use it to help even more people. Maria felt her heart swell. She had spent so many years feeling small, feeling like she was just a background character in other people's lives. But now, Marcus was telling her that she had a role to play, that she could be the one to lead others, to guide them to a better future. It was a moment of realization, one that filled her with pride and gratitude. I never thought of it like that, Maria said softly, her voice thick with emotion. But I think you're right. I think I'm ready for what's next. Marcus smiled, his eyes filled with approval. I know you are. As Maria sat there, taking in his words, she realized that her journey wasn't just about finding herself. It was about helping others find themselves, too. And that, she thought, was the most rewarding part of all. Maria had barely settled into the quiet rhythm of her new life when things began to take a turn. She was standing at the counter of the coffee shop one morning, wiping down a few stray crumbs from the edge, when a sudden shift in the air made her glance up. A familiar face had appeared in the doorway. It was Elizabeth. Maria's heart skipped a beat. She had not seen Elizabeth in weeks, had not heard from her since the phone call. Her immediate instinct was to turn away, to pretend she hadn't seen her, to continue with her work. But there was something in the way Elizabeth stood there, hesitant, unsure, that made Maria pause. Elizabeth's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Maria saw something different in them, vulnerability. She couldn't ignore the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this was a chance for something to change. Elizabeth stepped forward, her heels clicking softly on the floor. Maria, she said, her voice soft, almost fragile. Can I talk to you for a moment? Maria didn't move at first, the weight of the past lingering between them. It was tempting to simply dismiss her, to walk away and pretend nothing had changed. But Maria had already moved beyond that. She had learned that silence didn't solve anything, that ignoring the past didn't make it disappear. With a quiet sigh, she nodded and motioned for Elizabeth to sit at one of the small tables near the window. I didn't expect to see you here, Maria said, her voice calm, but with an edge that betrayed her curiosity. Elizabeth sat down, her hands trembling slightly as she folded them on the table in front of her. "I didn't know where else to go," she said quietly. "I've been trying to make things right. And I realized, I can't do it alone." The words were slow, deliberate, and Maria could tell they weren't easy for Elizabeth to say. Maria waited for her to continue. "I've been thinking about everything that happened," Elizabeth continued, her gaze fixed on her hands. "How I treated you, how I treated others. I didn't realize how toxic it was. I didn't realize how much damage I was causing. And now, everything is falling apart. I've lost control." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and Maria could feel the weight of them. She had spent so many years feeling trapped under Elizabeth's dominance, so many years wanting to be seen, to be heard. And now here was Elizabeth, stripped of her usual arrogance, admitting to the mistakes that had once kept Maria in her place. But Maria knew that this moment wasn't about her. This was about Elizabeth's need for redemption. It wasn't her responsibility to fix Elizabeth's life. "Why are you telling me this?" Maria asked, her voice steady. Elizabeth finally met her eyes, and Maria saw the raw honesty there. "Because you were the only one who ever truly stood up to me," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And I realize now that I needed that. I needed someone to challenge me. And I've been trying to fix things, trying to be better, but I don't know where to start." Maria sat back in her chair, considering Elizabeth's words. It would have been so easy to reject her, to walk away, to leave Elizabeth to face the consequences of her actions alone. But as Maria thought about it, she realized that this was the test of her growth, her journey, her healing. She had learned to forgive, to let go of the bitterness that had once consumed her. She had learned to move forward, not by forgetting the past, but by accepting it and choosing to create something better. "You can start by being honest," Maria said quietly. "Not just with me, but with yourself. You have to stop running from the truth. And you have to accept that you can't change everything in an instant. It's going to take time." Elizabeth nodded, her face flushed with shame and something else, regret, perhaps, or maybe a flicker of hope. "I understand," she whispered, "and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Maria studied her for a moment longer, her gaze unwavering. She had been angry at Elizabeth for so long, had harbored so much resentment. But now, seeing Elizabeth sitting in front of her, broken and seeking help, Maria realized that she couldn't hold on to that anger forever. It was time to let go. "I can't fix everything for you," Maria said, her voice firm but not unkind. "But I can help you find the right people, the right resources. And I can tell you that it's not too late to change. It's never too late." For the first time, Elizabeth's expression softened. "Thank you," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. Maria stood up, her heart lightening as she spoke. "You've got to do the work, Elizabeth. It's going to be hard, but it's worth it." Maria turned and began to walk away, but just before she reached the door, she paused. "And remember, Elizabeth," she said, her voice soft, "the only person you need to prove anything to is yourself." As she stepped out of the coffee shop, Maria felt the last of her old fears and doubts slip away. The conversation with Elizabeth, though unexpected, had helped her realize that forgiveness was something she could offer without losing herself. She wasn't responsible for Elizabeth's redemption, but she could choose to let go of the past and move forward. She could choose peace. And as the door closed behind her, Maria knew that she was ready for whatever came next. The days that followed felt like a blur to Maria. Everything had started to fall into place. She was helping others. She had rebuilt her own life. And yet, something inside her still felt unsettled. The conversation with Elizabeth lingered in her mind. It wasn't just about the words exchanged, but about the realization that sometimes people change. Sometimes, the most unexpected things happen, and people are forced to confront their own actions. But Maria also knew that Elizabeth's change wasn't her responsibility. She had done what she could, said what she needed to say, and now it was up to Elizabeth to do the real work. Maria had her own path to follow. It was time to focus on herself, on the people she was helping, and on the life she was continuing to build. As the sun set that evening, casting a soft orange glow over the streets, Maria walked home from the community center, her thoughts racing. The air was cooler now, and the familiar hum of the city filled her ears as she walked, the rhythm of the world around her grounding her. When she reached her apartment, she found a letter slipped under her door. At first, she thought it was just another bill or something she'd need to take care of, but as she looked at it, she recognized the handwriting. It was from Marcus. Maria felt a small knot form in her stomach as she opened the envelope. Inside, there was a note. Maria, I need you to meet me tomorrow. It's important. Please come to the center. I'll be waiting. The words were simple, but they sent a wave of unease through her. Marcus had always been supportive, always there for her when she needed it, but now she wondered what could be so important. The next morning, Maria found herself standing outside the community center, unsure of what to expect. She had made so many strides, both personally and in her work, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. She entered the building and found Marcus waiting in his office, pacing slightly as if lost in thought. He looked up when she entered and immediately gestured for her to sit. Maria, I'm glad you're here, he said, his voice serious. Maria took a seat, her curiosity piqued. What's going on? She asked. Marcus hesitated, clearly weighing his words before speaking. I've been working on something behind the scenes, he began. Something big, and I need your help. Maria raised an eyebrow, sensing the gravity of his words. What do you mean? She asked. Marcus sat down across from her, his expression intense. I've been in talks with a few people, officials, community leaders, other organizations. There's a chance for us to expand the program, to help more people. But in order for it to work, I need someone who understands what it's like to be on the other side of things. I need someone who's walked through the fire and come out stronger. Maria's heart began to race. The idea of expanding the program, of reaching more people, was both exciting and daunting. She had already seen the difference they could make, the lives they had touched. But the thought of taking on something bigger, of stepping into an even larger role, was overwhelming. I don't know if I'm ready for that, Maria admitted, her voice soft. I've come so far, but I'm not sure I can handle more. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes steady. Maria, you've been leading people already. You've already shown the strength it takes to rise from the ashes. What you're doing here, now, is just the beginning. But in order to truly make a lasting impact, you have to be willing to step up. I can't do this without you. I know you have it in you. The words hit her harder than she expected. She had spent so long feeling small, unworthy, but now here was Marcus, someone who had seen her strength, someone who believed in her. What if I fail? Maria asked, the vulnerability slipping into her voice. What if I can't live up to what you're asking? Marcus smiled, his expression warm yet understanding. The only way to fail is to not try. You've already come so far, Maria. Don't sell yourself short now. Maria took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. She had been afraid of failure for so long, afraid of taking the risks that came with change. But she realized that not trying, not stepping up, was the real failure. She had fought too hard to get to this point to back down now. Okay, she said, her voice firm. I'm in. I'll help you. I'll do whatever it takes. Marcus's face lit up with a smile of approval. I knew you would. We'll start the planning soon. You'll be a key part of this, Maria. As she left the meeting, Maria felt a surge of determination. She had made her choice. She wasn't going to back away from the challenge. She had spent too many years hiding, too many years letting fear dictate her actions. Now, she was ready to take charge. She was ready to lead. The road ahead would be difficult, but Maria had come too far to let anything stop her now. She was no longer the woman who had been overlooked, the woman who had been made to feel small. She was a woman with a purpose, a woman with a future she had the power to shape. And for the first time in her life, she was excited about what that future would hold. The following weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. Maria threw herself into the new project with a passion that surprised even herself. The goal was clear: to help more people, to reach those who needed support, and to make the program grow into something that could truly change lives. With Marcus by her side, Maria began to feel like she was stepping into a role she was meant to play all along. She wasn't just helping people find their way forward. She was leading the charge, taking ownership of the very program she had once only dreamed of being a part of. But with the excitement came challenges. The meetings, the logistics, the pressure to deliver results. It was all starting to take its toll on her. She was juggling work at the coffee shop, her responsibilities at the community center, and now this larger project that demanded more time and attention. Maria had always prided herself on her ability to handle things alone, but now, for the first time, she found herself reaching out for help. It wasn't easy for her. She had spent so many years isolated, doing everything herself, that asking for help felt like a vulnerability she hadn't known she had. One evening, after another long day of meetings and planning sessions, Maria sat down in her small apartment, exhausted. She rubbed her temples, trying to ease the tension that had built up over the past few days. The phone rang, breaking the silence, and she almost let it go to voicemail. But something inside her told her to answer. It was Marcus. "Maria, I know you're probably wiped out, but I need to talk to you about something," he said, his voice steady, but with an edge of urgency. Maria sat up, immediately alert. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "We've hit a roadblock," Marcus said. "There's a funding issue. The program's growth has been fantastic, but we don't have enough resources to keep up with the demand. If we don't get more funding, we'll have to scale back." The weight of his words sank in, and Maria felt her stomach drop. They had worked so hard to get to this point, and now it felt like everything was on the verge of falling apart. "What can we do?" Maria asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "I'm working on a few options, but we need someone to take the lead on this. Someone who knows the program inside and out. Someone who can speak to the value it's providing." Marcus paused. "Maria, I need you to represent us. You've seen the impact we're making. You're the one who can make the case to potential donors, to the people who can help us stay afloat." Maria took a deep breath. The pressure of it all was mounting, but she knew Marcus was right. This was her moment to step up, to prove that she could not only lead but advocate for the program she had helped build. "I'll do it," Maria said, her voice firm. "I'll make sure they understand what we're doing here, how important it is. We can't let this slip away." "I knew I could count on you," Marcus said, relief evident in his voice. "You're the heart of this, Maria. Let's make sure we don't lose it." The next few days were a blur of preparation. Maria spent hours researching potential donors, crafting a compelling message that would highlight the success of the program, and organizing a presentation that would showcase the impact they were making in the community. She spent late nights rehearsing, practicing her pitch, refining her words until they felt right. But as the day of the presentation approached, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling in her chest. What if it wasn't enough? What if they didn't believe in the program the way she did? The doubt crept in like an unwelcome guest, but Maria pushed it aside. She had come too far to let fear dictate her actions now. The day of the presentation, Maria stood in front of a room full of potential donors. Her heart pounded, but she stood tall, her voice steady as she began to speak. "We are a community, and together, we've built something that is changing lives," she began, looking around the room, meeting the eyes of those listening. "This program is more than just a support system. It's a lifeline for people who are rebuilding after loss, after hardship. We provide the tools, the resources, and most importantly, the hope that these individuals need to reclaim their lives." As Maria spoke, she felt the weight of her words. She wasn't just talking about a program. She was talking about her own journey, the journey of everyone who had come through the doors of the community center, looking for a way forward. She spoke about the success stories, about the people whose lives had been transformed because they had found the support they needed. She spoke from the heart, her words flowing freely, fueled by the passion she felt for the work they were doing. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment. She held her breath, waiting for a response. Then, slowly, one of the donors stood up, clapping. One by one, others joined in, their applause filling the room. Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. The funding was secured. The program would continue to grow, continue to make a difference. As she left the meeting that day, Maria felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't known before. She had not only fought for the program's survival, but she had also proven to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. She had stepped up, faced her doubts, and overcome them. And in doing so, she had secured the future of the program she had helped build, a future that would allow others to find the same hope and healing she had found. It was a moment of victory, but Maria knew the journey wasn't over. There was still so much more to do, so many more lives to touch, so many more steps to take. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. After the success of securing the funding, Maria found herself in a new phase of her journey. There was a sense of accomplishment that filled her, but it didn't last long. The program had grown, and so had her responsibilities. More people were coming through the doors, seeking help, support, and guidance. Maria had become the heart of the operation, the one they all looked to for inspiration. Yet, with the newfound sense of purpose came a quiet pressure that she hadn't anticipated. She was no longer just a participant in the program. She was now a leader, a symbol of what was possible, but that weight was heavy. As days turned into weeks, Maria felt herself stretched thin. She had a deep well of energy when it came to helping others, but she found herself running out of time for herself. The constant balancing act between the community center, the coffee shop, and the lives of those she was helping had become overwhelming. There were moments when she questioned if she could really handle it all. One evening, as she sat at her small kitchen table, going over the day's events, the weight of everything seemed to settle on her shoulders. She had just finished meeting with a new group, and they were making progress, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was barely keeping it together. Her phone buzzed on the table, interrupting her thoughts. It was a text from Marcus. "I think we need to talk. Can you meet tomorrow?" Maria felt a pang of anxiety in her chest. She had been so focused on the success of the program that she hadn't noticed how much she had been neglecting herself. She hadn't taken a moment to breathe, to check in with how she was really doing. The next day, she met Marcus at the community center. He was waiting for her, his face a mix of concern and resolve. "I'm glad you're here," Marcus said as soon as she walked in. "I've been watching you. You're doing incredible work, but I think you're burning yourself out." Maria sat down, unsure of how to respond. She hadn't realized how much it had been affecting her until now. "I'm fine," she said, though the words felt hollow as they left her lips. Marcus didn't buy it. "Maria," he said gently, "you can't keep going at this pace. You're one person, and you're trying to carry the weight of everything. You need to take care of yourself, or none of this will work." His words hit home, and Maria couldn't deny the truth in them. She had been so focused on giving everything she had to others that she had forgotten to care for herself. "I don't know how to stop," Maria admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "I feel like I have to keep pushing, keep doing more. There are so many people who need help, and if I stop, who will help them?" Marcus leaned forward, his expression kind but firm. "You need to understand that taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. You're the one holding everything together, but you can't do that if you're running on empty." Maria looked down at her hands, realizing just how much truth there was in his words. She had been so afraid of failing, of letting others down, that she had forgotten the most important thing. She couldn't pour from an empty cup. "What should I do?" Maria asked, the weight of it all still sitting heavily in her chest. Marcus smiled softly, understanding her struggle. "You need to delegate, Maria. You've built an incredible team, and you've taught them to be strong. Let them carry some of the load. Trust them." Maria hesitated, feeling the familiar tug of doubt. "But what if they can't handle it?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "You've prepared them. They're ready. And you're not alone in this. You've built something bigger than just you." Maria nodded slowly, the realization starting to sink in. She had spent so long trying to do everything herself that it had never occurred to her to trust others to help. But now, as she looked at Marcus, she knew he was right. She wasn't alone. She had a team, a support system, and it was time to lean on them. "Okay," Maria said, taking a deep breath. "I'll do it. I'll trust them." Over the next few days, Maria began to hand off some of her responsibilities. It wasn't easy at first. She had spent so long doing everything on her own that letting go felt like a loss of control. But as she allowed others to take on more, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. Slowly, the pressure began to ease. Her team stepped up, and the program continued to thrive. Maria realized that trusting others didn't mean she had failed. It meant she had grown. It meant she was building something that could stand on its own, something that wasn't dependent on her alone. As the weeks passed, Maria found a new rhythm. She still worked hard, still dedicated herself to the program, but now she made time for herself too. She spent time with friends, took walks in the park, and even treated herself to quiet evenings at home. The balance she had once thought impossible was starting to feel within reach. One evening, as she sat on her apartment balcony, watching the sunset, Maria thought back to everything she had gone through. She had come so far, from being a woman who felt invisible to someone who had found her voice and her purpose. She had learned that it was okay to ask for help, that it was okay to take a step back when needed. The journey wasn't over, but Maria now understood that taking care of herself was just as important as helping others. In that moment, as the sky turned dark and the stars began to shine, Maria felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. She was no longer chasing something outside of herself. She was creating a life that reflected who she truly was, and for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Maria walked into the community center that morning with a sense of purpose, but also a quiet dread that had begun to settle in her chest. The success of the program, the impact she had made, it was all so much bigger than she had ever anticipated. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just a part of something. She was leading it. She had built something real, something meaningful. But as much as the community was thriving, Maria could feel the weight of it all pressing down on her. She had spent so much time taking care of others that she hadn't stopped to check in with herself. And now, as the program grew and more people came to rely on her, she was beginning to question whether she could continue carrying the load. Her team was strong, but Maria had always been the one they looked to for guidance, for answers, and she couldn't help but wonder if she was enough. Walking through the door, she found the room already filled with people, her team, the clients, and a few new faces she hadn't met yet. As she approached the front of the room, she could feel their eyes on her, expecting her to have all the answers. It was a familiar feeling, but now it felt heavier than ever. She had always been the one to step up, to take on the responsibility, to solve the problems. But what happened when she didn't have all the answers? What if she wasn't the one who could fix everything? The thought unsettled her. Maria cleared her throat as she stood in front of the group, her mind racing as she tried to focus. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice slightly shaky but steady. "I'm glad to see so many of you here today." As she spoke, she noticed a few people looking at her expectantly. It wasn't just the clients who depended on her now. It was her team too. They trusted her, relied on her. And that weight, while a source of pride, also felt like a burden. She continued, trying to keep her voice calm and clear. "We've made incredible progress with this program. The community is stronger, more connected, and we're helping people in ways I never thought possible. But as we move forward, we need to think about how we can keep growing, how we can sustain this." The room was silent, everyone listening intently. Maria paused, feeling the pressure of their collective gaze. "I've been thinking a lot about what's next for us, about how we can keep the momentum going, how we can support everyone who needs our help," she said, trying to sound confident. "But I also want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? How can we do better?" She looked out over the group, waiting for someone to speak, but the silence stretched on. It wasn't the quiet of a group deep in thought. It was the quiet of uncertainty. Finally, one of the team members, Jake, spoke up. "Maria, we've all been doing a great job. But, with more people coming in, we're all starting to feel the strain. We're spreading ourselves thin. I think we need to start delegating more, maybe even find some additional help." Maria's chest tightened at his words. She had felt the strain too, but hearing someone else acknowledge it made it feel more real. "I know," she said, forcing a smile. "But I feel like if we don't stay on top of everything, we'll lose what we've built." Another team member, Elena, spoke up. "You're right, Maria. But at the same time, we can't do everything. We need to trust each other more. You've been carrying a lot of the load on your own." Maria swallowed hard. Elena's words hit her harder than she expected. She had been so focused on making sure everything was perfect that she had neglected to share the weight of it. She had thought she could handle it, but now she realized she couldn't do it all alone. "I didn't want to admit it," Maria said quietly, "but I think you're right. I've been trying to keep everything together, but maybe I've been trying too hard to control it all. I need to trust you all more. I can't do this by myself." There was a moment of quiet before Jake spoke again. "We're here for you, Maria. You don't have to do it all alone. We've all got your back." A wave of relief washed over her. The weight that had been pressing down on her seemed to ease, just a little. She wasn't alone in this. She had a team, people who understood, who were willing to help her shoulder the responsibility. "Thank you," Maria said, her voice softer now. "I've been so focused on making sure everyone else is okay that I forgot about myself. I need to trust you more, and I need to take a step back when I'm overwhelmed." As the meeting continued, Maria realized that she had made an important shift. She had always believed that leadership meant carrying the burden alone, but now, she understood that true leadership meant knowing when to lean on others, when to ask for help, and when to trust the team around her. The rest of the meeting went smoothly, with ideas flowing freely and the team members contributing their thoughts and suggestions. Maria felt a sense of pride and gratitude for the people she worked with. They weren't just a team, they were a family, and they had each other's backs. As the meeting wrapped up, Maria stepped outside into the fresh air. The weight on her shoulders had lightened, and for the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe again. She had come a long way from the woman who had once been afraid to ask for help. She had learned that asking for help didn't make her weak, it made her stronger. As she walked home that evening, Maria felt a new sense of clarity. She wasn't just building a program, she was building a community. And that, she realized, was more important than anything else. The weeks following that pivotal meeting with her team felt like a turning point for Maria. The weight she had carried for so long had finally been shared, and with that relief came a new understanding of her role. She wasn't just a leader, she was part of something larger than herself. The community they had built was strong, but it was stronger because they had all committed to being there for each other. For the first time in her life, Maria truly felt that sense of belonging. Yet, even as she adjusted to this new way of leading, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was on the horizon. There was a new urgency in the air. The program was growing faster than anyone had anticipated, and with that growth came the inevitable challenges. The demand for their services was higher than ever before. And while Maria had felt like she had mastered the art of balancing everything, she knew that this new phase would require something different. One afternoon, as she was reviewing paperwork at the community center, Marcus walked in. He had that serious expression on his face, the kind that always made Maria sit up a little straighter. "Maria, we need to talk," he said, his voice calm but intense. "It's about the program." Maria closed the folder in front of her and looked up at him. "What's going on?" she asked, her heart picking up the pace. "We've been doing great," Marcus said, sitting down across from her. "But we're at a crossroads. We need to expand even further and fast. The demand is overwhelming. We need more staff, more resources, and soon." Maria's stomach tightened. She knew this day was coming, but hearing it out loud still hit her like a ton of bricks. The pressure had been building for weeks, and now it was all coming to a head. "What are you suggesting?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus leaned forward. "We need to apply for larger grants, reach out to corporate sponsors. We can't keep running on donations alone. And we need you to be the one to lead the charge." Maria felt a rush of anxiety, but she didn't let it show. Leading was one thing, but now, Marcus wanted her to represent the program on an even larger scale. She had never been part of anything this big before. She had never felt the weight of such responsibility. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Maria admitted, the uncertainty in her voice uncharacteristic of the confident leader she had become. "I don't know how to take this program to the next level." Marcus smiled, a reassuring smile that reminded her of why she trusted him. "You've already taken it to the next level, Maria," he said softly. "This is just a natural progression. You've built this program from the ground up. You know it better than anyone else. And you're the only one who can make sure it continues to grow and thrive." Maria sat back in her chair, her mind racing. The idea of pushing the program further was exciting, but the thought of managing that growth was daunting. Could she really do this? Could she handle this next phase of responsibility? She closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, she met Marcus's gaze. "Okay," she said, her voice steady. "I'll do it. I'll lead the expansion. But I'm going to need help. We can't do this alone." Marcus nodded. "We'll get the support we need. But you're the one who can make it happen." As the days passed, Maria threw herself into the work. The pressure was overwhelming at times, but she remembered what she had learned. She didn't have to do everything herself. She reached out to her team for help, asked for advice from those who had been through similar experiences, and slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. She focused on what needed to be done and made a plan for how to tackle it. She reached out to potential donors, created proposals for corporate sponsorships, and organized meetings with the people who could make the expansion a reality. Every step felt like a giant leap, but Maria was determined. The thought of letting this program fail was not an option. It wasn't just a project to her, it was her purpose. It was everything she had worked for. And as the weeks went by, she saw the fruits of her labor beginning to take shape. The program grew, just as she had hoped. They brought in more staff, more volunteers, and more resources. The community was stronger than ever, and Maria began to feel a sense of pride in what they had accomplished. But even as the program expanded, Maria couldn't ignore the small voice in the back of her mind. It told her that the real challenge was just beginning. As the program grew, so did the expectations. The pressure to deliver, to make sure everything went smoothly, to ensure that the lives they were helping would continue to improve, it was a constant reminder of the stakes. Maria had always been a perfectionist, always worked hard to make everything just right. But now, she realized that perfect wasn't the goal. The goal was progress, growth, and making a lasting impact. One day, after a particularly long meeting with the new team members, Maria stood by the window of her office, looking out at the busy street below. She had done it. The program was expanding. She had faced her doubts, worked through her fears, and built something bigger than herself. And as she stood there, looking out at the world beyond, she realized that the road ahead would still be full of challenges. But she was ready for it, because she had built this. And she wasn't going to let anything stop her now. The pressure had only intensified in the weeks that followed, and as Maria stepped into the community center that morning, the weight of it all was becoming hard to ignore. The expansion was moving faster than anyone had expected, and as the program grew, so did the expectations. There was no turning back now. Maria had led them this far, and now, she was tasked with taking the program to new heights, while also making sure everything ran smoothly. But with each new step forward, Maria felt a little more stretched, a little more overwhelmed. The balance she had worked so hard to achieve was slipping. She had always prided herself on being someone who could handle it all, who could do it all herself. But now, she was starting to realize that doing it all was no longer an option. As she entered the center that morning, she was greeted by a small group of volunteers who had come in early to help with preparations for a new set of workshops. There was a sense of excitement in the air, but Maria could feel a growing tension within herself. She smiled and exchanged pleasantries with the volunteers, but her mind kept drifting back to the challenges ahead. She had to secure more funding, continue managing the program's growth, and support the team, all while trying to maintain some semblance of balance in her personal life. As the day went on, Maria found herself checking and rechecking every detail, making sure that no one slipped through the cracks. But the stress was starting to show. She found herself snapping at her team during a meeting, her patience wearing thin as she juggled countless tasks. It wasn't like her. She had always been calm, composed, the one everyone relied on. But today, the cracks in the facade were beginning to show. Later that evening, after another long day at the center, Maria returned to her apartment, her mind racing. She sat at her kitchen table, trying to make sense of everything. How had she gotten here? How had she gone? From the woman who had barely been able to make ends meet to the woman who was leading a growing community program? It had all happened so fast, and now, the weight of it all felt unbearable. She ran a hand through her hair, exhaling deeply. It was then that her phone buzzed. It was a message from Marcus. "We need to talk," it said. "Can you meet tomorrow?" Maria's heart sank. She knew what this was about. The pressure had caught up to her, and now, Marcus was about to call her out on it. The next day, Maria met Marcus at the community center. He was waiting for her in his office, a serious look on his face. "Maria, you've been pushing yourself too hard," he said without preamble as soon as she walked in. "You've been doing an incredible job, but I can see you're burning out. We need to talk about how we're going to handle this moving forward." Maria swallowed hard, the tension in her chest tightening even further. "I'm fine," she said, her voice tight. "Everything's fine." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Maria, I know you're not one to ask for help, but you can't keep going like this. You're spreading yourself too thin, and it's starting to affect the work we're doing here." Maria looked down, her heart pounding. He was right. She had been trying to do everything herself, trying to prove that she could handle it all. But in reality, she was falling apart. "I don't know what to do," Maria admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I feel like if I don't do it all, it'll all fall apart. I've come so far. I don't want to let anyone down." "Maria," Marcus said, his tone gentle but firm, "you're not alone in this. You've built an amazing team, and you need to trust them. You can't carry all the responsibility by yourself. You need to delegate, to lean on others. You've taught them everything they need to know. Now, it's time to let them take the reins on some of the work. Maria felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had always been the one to step up, to take charge, but the thought of letting go of some of the control felt like a huge step back. But deep down, she knew Marcus was right. She couldn't keep doing everything on her own. I don't know how, Maria said, her voice faltering. I've always done it this way. It's hard to let go. You don't have to do it all at once, Marcus reassured her. Start small. Let go of one thing at a time. You've built this team because you trust them. Now, it's time for them to prove they can handle it. And you need to trust that they will. Maria nodded slowly, the weight lifting just a little. She knew Marcus was right. She couldn't do everything herself, and letting others take on more wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of growth. She wasn't alone in this. She had a team, a family, and they were in this together. Over the next few days, Maria began to delegate. It wasn't easy at first, but as she watched her team step up and take charge, she felt a sense of relief. They were capable. They were ready. And slowly, the burden that had been weighing so heavily on her began to lift. Maria wasn't doing it all alone anymore. She was leading, but she was also letting her team lead alongside her. The balance was shifting, and for the first time in a long time, Maria felt like she was no longer sinking under the pressure. She was swimming. And that, she realized, was what true leadership was about: trusting others, sharing the load, and knowing when to let go. Months passed, and the transformation Maria had undergone became even more apparent. The community center, once a small initiative that Maria had struggled to hold together on her own, had blossomed into a thriving hub of support, outreach, and hope. The team she had built and nurtured had taken on more responsibility, and the program had continued to grow, reaching more people than ever before. They had built partnerships with local businesses, secured additional funding, and were now a staple in the community, known for their commitment to helping people rebuild their lives. Maria had learned to delegate, to trust in her team, and to give herself permission to step back when needed. But it wasn't just the program that had grown, it was Maria herself. She was no longer the quiet, uncertain woman who had once lived in the shadows of someone else's expectations. She had found her own voice, her own path. She had become a leader, but more importantly, she had become someone who understood the power of compassion and trust. And now, as she sat in her office one late afternoon, looking out over the bustling streets of the city, Maria reflected on how far she had come. She thought about the phone call from Elizabeth, the woman who had once been her employer, who had asked for help, only to be turned down. Maria had made peace with that decision. She had no obligation to go back to that life. Her journey had been about learning to stand on her own, to build something new, something that was hers. But even more than that, it had been about realizing that she had the power to make a difference, not just for herself, but for others too. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the city in soft, golden light, Maria received a message on her phone. It was from Marcus. I need to see you. Can you meet tomorrow? Maria felt a small flutter of nervousness in her chest. It had been a while since they had had a one-on-one meeting. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the program and had learned to manage things without the constant check-ins. Still, she knew that Marcus was someone she trusted, someone who had always had her back. The next day, Maria met Marcus at a cafe near the center. As she walked in, she saw him sitting at a corner table, his usual calm demeanor in place, though there was something in his eyes that made her pause. Hey, she said as she sat down across from him. What's going on? Marcus smiled, but it was a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I've been thinking a lot about everything, he began. The program, how far we've come, how much we've accomplished. And then I realized something. I couldn't have done it without you. Maria shook her head. It wasn't just me. It's been a team effort. You were a huge part of this too. Marcus nodded. But you were the one who started it all, Maria. You were the one who took the first step, who believed that it could be done. And because of you, we've been able to reach so many people. Maria smiled softly, but inside, she felt a deep sense of humility. She hadn't started this journey to be praised or recognized. She had done it because it was the right thing to do, because she had learned that her own healing was connected to the healing of others. Thank you, she said quietly. But I couldn't have done it without you. You've been my support from the beginning. Marcus reached across the table, placing a hand over hers. I know, he said, his voice sincere. And that's why I want to talk to you about something. I think it's time for you to take on even more responsibility. Maria's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? She asked. Marcus took a deep breath. I think it's time for you to become the executive director of this program. You've been leading it for months now, and I think you're ready to take it to the next level. You've shown that you can manage, inspire, and bring people together. You're ready for this role. Maria was speechless for a moment. She had never imagined this for herself. She had always seen herself as a worker, someone who helped in the background. But the thought of stepping into a leadership role of this magnitude filled her with a mix of excitement and fear. I don't know, she said, unsure of how to process what Marcus was offering. What if I fail? You won't fail, Marcus said firmly. You've already proven everything you need to. You've built this program. You've shown that you can handle responsibility. And now it's time for you to take this to the next level. You've earned it. Maria felt a wave of gratitude and self-doubt wash over her. She had always been afraid of stepping into the spotlight, of taking on more responsibility. But in that moment, she realized something. She had already come so far. She had built something from nothing, and now she had the chance to make an even bigger impact. She wasn't going to let fear hold her back anymore. I'll do it, Maria said, her voice steady, but filled with emotion. I'll take on the role. I won't let you down. Marcus smiled, his eyes full of pride. I know you won't. As they sat there, talking about the future and the next steps for the program, Maria realized that this was the culmination of everything she had worked for. She had come from a place of darkness, uncertainty, and fear, and now she was stepping into a future she had once only dreamed of. The journey wasn't over. There were still challenges ahead, still moments when doubt would creep in. But Maria knew one thing for sure. She was no longer afraid. She had learned to trust herself, to trust others, and to step into her own power. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she was truly living her purpose. In this inspiring story, Maria's journey takes her from being a woman overlooked and undervalued to someone who not only finds her voice, but also leads a growing program that helps others rebuild their lives. Along the way, Maria learns the importance of self-care, trust, and community. As she faces new challenges, the stakes rise, and she must decide if she's willing to trust others, delegate responsibility, and take on a leadership role. This story, like many Black stories, shows the resilience of the human spirit and the power of community support. Maria's personal transformation is an inspiring example of how, with determination and support, anyone can overcome their past and create a future filled with hope. The narrative touches on the theme of empowerment, illustrating how Black stories can highlight the strength and transformation that comes with trusting others and standing up for yourself. In this story, Maria ultimately discovers her purpose and becomes a leader, breaking free from the limits imposed on her by others. The journey reflects how Black stories often involve overcoming obstacles and rising to the occasion, demonstrating the power of personal growth and communal strength. As Maria steps into a new chapter of her life, she finds peace and fulfillment, proving that with the right support, even the toughest challenges can lead to beautiful outcomes.